joining us on 710 KURV. It's a very interesting topic that seems to go back and forth a lot. The topic of vaping, right? It was good, then it was bad, then it was good, then it was bad. It might be good again. From Young Voices, David Mendoza. And he is a native Californian who teaches at a classical academy in Sacramento with a BA in history from the Masters University and an MA in historical theology from Westminster Seminary, California. He joins us now, and he's trust me, he's got a lot more credentials than we've got time for today. Trust me. So, thank you. Welcome to the program. You've got an article in the Orange County Register on vaping, and it might actually help people quit smoking, interestingly enough. So what is this study and what does it have to say?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here on KURV. So this is a study that was released by the New England Journal of Medicine. And the title of the article was Electronic Nicotine Delivery Systems for Smoking Cessation. And the study was conducted in Switzerland on 1,246 people who smoked at least 5 cigarettes a day and wanted a quit date, or they wanted to set a date for them to be off of regular combustion cigarettes. Half of the group was put into what was called an intervention group, and the other half were placed into what they called a control group. In the intervention group, participants were given free e-cigarettes and free liquids, along with regular smoking cessation counseling. In the control group, they were given just regular standard cessation counseling and a voucher which could be used for a number of reasons, including nicotine replacement therapy. And what the study basically concluded was that that 28% or 28.9% was the rate for the intervention group as far as smoking cessation was concerned. And then for the control group, they had a cessation rate of about 16.3%. They summarized their conclusions at the end of the report saying the addition of e-cigarettes to standard smoking cessation counseling resulted in greater abstinence from tobacco use among smokers than smoking cessation counseling alone. And that is a quote.
Why do you think that there's been such a back and forth on vaping in the short time that we've been practicing it?
That's a good question. I think that there's definitely a concern that comes from a good place on the part of parents and public health officials that vaping is really popular amongst teens. In fact, Sanjay Gupta gave an interview on CNN talking about how this is a trend, just like any other trend, but he said that this trend doesn't look like it's going away. And you had men like J. Taylor Hayes, the director of the Mayo Clinic Nicotine Dependence Center, who actually stated in an interview that vaping served as a gateway to regular combustion smoking. And so there's been sort of a number of faulty studies that have also kind of been put forth that have been retracted that sort of drew a connection between vaping serving as a gateway or vaping causing certain forms of cancer. But I think that there's been sort of a hasty response on the part of public health officials to put bans in place on vaping or e-cigarettes as a way to try to curb teen use of smoking.
I'm not somebody that purchases these items, but I was under the impression that these things are not under lock and key, but basically just like cigarettes. You have to ask the attendant asks you for an ID card, and that's how you get a hold of it. So I'm assuming that the way that kids get vapes are the same way that they would get regular cigarettes. Is basically like they have an older brother or something, and the older brother's not all that, safe and secure with his stash, as it were, or something to that effect, or a fake ID, or they just know somebody. Is that more or less why the kids get into, or how the kids get into it?
That is more or less how they get into it, yeah. And I think what the attraction for them is that the flavors of these products are more sort of flavorful and to their liking as far as the taste is concerned. They're not per se turned on to the taste of tobacco or even nicotine, but when you have something that has a particular flavor that's more, fruity or something like that, that's kind of how they kind of get caught up into it, so to speak. But yeah, it would be the normal way, just like anything else.
Joining us on 710 KURV is David Mendoza, who's got an article in the Orange County Register, an opinion column titled "Whether Anti-Vaping Activists Like It or Not, Vaping Helps Smokers Quit." And so the bad rap that vaping gets, a lot of this has to do with just how kids are getting a hold of these things, and not so much whether or not studies like this from the New England Journal of Medicine have to show whether how effective it is to help people stop smoking, right?
Yeah, the concern is over teens, and so there's actually been a number of states, though, that have sort of overstepped or like had an overreaction to this by implementing statewide bans on the products as a whole. So you saw this in California and in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first state to enact this. And so it's kind of the attitude of, well, because we want to keep teens from using these products in a way that it sort of gets them addicted to them quicker than a regular cigarette, which, by the way, isn't true. In order to curb that, they've decided, well, we're just going to ban all these products for even adults. That way the adults and the kids don't have any access to these. And I think that assumes that those bans will work, which I actually don't think that the experiment in Massachusetts has sort of paved that out.
And it's interesting too, because you would think, well, if they were really passionate about getting rid of smoking in general, they would just ban the cigarettes. They would just ban the cigarettes too, and not just the vaping.
Yes, no, that is a good point, and some people have highlighted that. There's been a video in Reason magazine where they actually pointed out that a lot of these big name tobacco products sort of get grandfathered into these bans, and so you get regular combustion cigarettes still on the market, which do cause a legitimate public health concern, but they end up staying on the markets when these sort of harm reduction alternatives end up sort of getting banned or not. They're not available for them anymore. And that actually does have some other effects because it also drives the demand for these markets sort of underground, where black markets or illicit markets sort of provide the supply for that demand. And then the people that would be seeking out e-cigarettes or flavored tobacco products actually end up putting something in their body that's not regulated in any way. So it actually ends up being more dangerous or more risky, so to speak, than it would otherwise be had it not been banned by that state.
Let me go back to the topic of vaping and how it helps people quit smoking. And I wanted to ask, why? How did you come across this study, and why did you want to showcase it?
Yeah, it was actually sent to me by a colleague at Young Voices. I had written a piece for the Orange County Register before, sort of talking about the legislation that California had recently implemented. So out here, we recently voted to sort of double down on a ban that went into effect in 2021, I believe, basically to curb this use of flavored tobacco in e-cigarettes. And so the new legislation that's been sort of added to strengthen that went into effect this year on January 1st. California is going to, I predict, see a very similar situation that Massachusetts had seen, which would include these bans sort of not following through on their promises, but also a huge loss in tax revenue that these products actually could provide for the state. And so when I came across this article through a colleague, I thought that this would actually be a huge wake-up call for the advocates in favor of bans. And actually, the article was released along with an editorial by Nancy Rigotti, who's a researcher at Harvard. And she also does research at Massachusetts General Hospital. And she actually added her own piece on this, where she says, quote, "It is now time for the medical community to acknowledge this progress and add e-cigarettes to the smoking cessation toolkit. U.S. public health agencies and professional medical societies should reconsider their cautious positions on e-cigarettes for smoking cessation," end quote. And so with this new research that has come out that is highly credible, it is a peer-reviewed paper